kind of interesting to sing or to read the beginning of that story and the end of the story and miss the whole arc stuff, right? And so some of you I know are tempted to want to sing right now the rest of the story, right? Green alligators and long-necked geese, some humpty-back camels and some chimpanzees, right? Rats and cats and elephants, and sure as you're born, the loveliest of all was thee. Oh, come on. That was pretty weak. You know, I've told you before, I always wanted to be this Irish rover, the guy in the middle. Green alligators and long-necked geese. I have to be frank with you, though, that this story scares me. It scares me a lot. You just have to ask Reverend Deb how I fretted this week, yesterday especially, shaken to my core by the Spirit with the idea that I was going to have to preach on Noah's Ark and the story this week. I know that we all love the animals part, 2x2s or twosies. Some parts of the story it's 7s, just for the record, go read it again. But to get there, and the rainbow, that's nice. And we put it in nurseries, like we paint walls, or we have it in children's books. And we use it as great graphics, the rainbow and the animals. There's something about that. I had an ark with the little porcelain animals. We used to play with it, right? All that stuff is great for our imagination. But to get there as a Christian church, we have to pass through a God who destroys the whole world. It's not easy to read, and it's certainly not easy to understand. Chapter 6, verse 5. The Lord saw that the wickedness of humankind was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. I've never heard a phrase like that before, those kind of words, only evil continually. It catches me. And the Lord was sorry that he'd made humankind on earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Not only do these two verses set the action of the story in motion, but they hold for us the deep focus of the story, because I think we've gotten it wrong over the years. It's not the animals. It's not necessarily the rainbow. It's the thoughts of their hearts. That's the human beings. And then heart is used again immediately. And it grieved God in his heart. This is the purpose of this story. It doesn't belong to the realm of historical fact. I know there are people searching for the ark on this very day in Mount Ararat. It's folly. This isn't a historical story. It's a true story. It's a story about hearts. The hearts of the people and the heart of their God. We find in this story a clear tension between God's expectation for the world that God has created and what has actually come to pass. We find a God who will not abandon that expectation at any cost. God is expectant, impatient, and uncompromising when it comes to creation. And we find a people whose hearts are unrelievedly hostile. Every inclination of the thoughts of their hearts was only evil continually. One of the great pastoral questions for us as a community when reading this story is whether or not God can or would actually destroy the world. It gives us a chill to read about this God. This week I realized the answer to that question from within this story is that humanity was already well on its way to destroying the earth. The point of the story isn't that God destroyed the earth in a punishing sort of way. The part of the point is that we destroyed the earth first. We were going in that direction. And it seems today, in many ways, we keep choosing that path. And we seem bent and determined on taking the earth with us. So we find a God at the beginning of the story who is hurt, not angry. Never says God is angry. It says God is saddened. It grieved God in her heart deeply. The crisis of this story is not the evil of humanity, and it's not even the flood. The crisis of this story exists in the heart of God. The God who has breathed, danced, and spoken creation into being now finds that creation is corrupted and utterly perverse. But there's no anger registered. The response is the response of a saddened God, a hurt parent. Luckily, along comes Noah. And it says, Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. I remember hearing that in God's Trombones, a famous musical from the south of America, of the United States. And the preacher says, and Noah walked with God, and then the choir stands up and starts to sing about Noah's holiness. I always wondered as a kid, I still dream about it today, what's it like to walk with God? I wonder if I could ever get it right enough that they might say that after I've gone. Noah walked with God. Noah embodies or represents the alternative possibility to the destructive ways of humanity. He brings up in this story an alternate path. He was, in Hebrew, tzedek, which is righteous. That means he upheld all of the responsibilities that he was called to in his life. His responsibilities as a dad, as a husband, as a farmer, as a community member, in relationship to his God and what his God asked of him. All of his relationships were fulfilled in a holy and wonderful, responsible way. He was righteous. Noah serves as the seed of the possibility that might come after God's sadness. And so we have the famous story of the ark and the animals and the finding of the land. You can go home, I hope, and read the middle parts, 6, 7, 8, and 9. After the flood, interestingly enough, God realizes that humans are still humans and that they will always carry a destructive tendency inside them. But decides this: I will never again curse the ground because of humankind, for the inclination of the human heart is evil from youth, God says. But nor will I ever again destroy every living creature as I have done. This is what this story is actually about. This story is important to our faith lives and the lives and the history of Israel and us, the spiritual descendants of Israel. It's important because it's about a God, our God, changing God's mind. The resolution of this story, the ending filled with blessing and a bow in the sky, doesn't really come because of anything Noah did. The people are still evil from youth, God says. Noah doesn't, in fact, save humanity. God does. Now, many in the history of our religion would like to tell you of an eternal and unchanging God. Oh, we like to sing about it. Eternal, unchanging, do-do-do. Remember? But that's not the God of the Israelites, my friends. That's the God of the Greeks. And it snuck its way into Christianity by mistake. Sneaky Greeks and their sneaky Greek thinking got into our theology. The God of the Israelites, the God of our ancestors of faith, is a God that is touched and moved by the human condition. One who hurts, celebrates, responds, and acts with freedom, and in fact, changes. In this story, we find a God who out of sadness destroys, but comes to a new understanding of his own purpose in relationship with creation. This is not a story about us. It's not a story about the earth. It's not a story about animals. This is a story about the heart of God. God changes and decides to not be a God, to not be a God of harsh and distant judgment, but a God who is the resilient affirmation of a life on behalf of a creature seemingly bent on death. God is the resilient affirmation of life, no matter what, constantly working on behalf of the creature seemingly bent on death. Well, that's good news. That's the gospel right there. God changes, grows, and is ready. In our darkest times, in our deepest doubt, are we there today? In our highest forms of death dealing, we can be assured that God will always, has been, still, and will be working hard for life instead of what we dish up on a regular basis. And God changes and grows in relationship with us on the side of life always. If God grows and moves and changes, I thought this week, so then must the community of God. A community of faith that believes in an unchanging God is one that believes it too can remain unchanged in its beliefs, opinions, practices, attitudes. We all bear the scars of a belief system of an unchanging, immovable God, because that brings about ideas of a judging God or a strict God or a God of tradition who says this and it never will move. And we've become, at times, those kind of people. We think that's the image of God that may live in us. Not true. We know how dangerous that can become. Judas believed in that kind of God. The Spanish Inquisition believed in that kind of God. ISIS believes in that kind of God. A God of absolutes, strict, boxed in, never changing, never moving. So why should we? Friends, I want us to dream in this fall as we move into it. I want us to dream of a God who dances and sings and has conversations like with Moses and Abraham, who will argue and discuss and wrestle and roll and coerce us, not coerce us, call us and goad us, that's the word, into new being as God grows with us in our lives. A God who is right here with us, wrestling with Jacob, feeding the 5,000, speaking with Moses at length. What are we going to do? How's this sound? Well, okay, let's go this way. That's our God, the God of a spirit that lives and breathes outside of boxes, and therefore can enter into our hearts and grow with us if only we would be open to moving ourselves. Next time you see a rainbow, remember that.